onto the EL wires, we have to remove some of this outer blue jacket. So I'm going to do it with the regular wire strippers. We're going to set it on 20 gauge, score the outside jacket, and then pull it off. And what you're left with is the center core wire and two little hair thin wires.
What we're going to do is put some copper tape on, and that's going to give us something to solder to those little wires, because if you actually just attached a larger wire to those, they'd break in an instant. So what we're going to do is fold them back, wrap some copper tape around the main plastic jacket, and solder them to that. Just a little piece of this stuff, just like that much, like so, because it's just going to wrap around a couple times. It's got some adhesive on it. Like so. And we're going to fold the little corona wires back so that they're in contact with that copper, and that's what we're going to solder them to. Okay, so now we're going to solder that on, and just proper soldering technique, which you can learn from a book or a website or something. Just make sure they're both nicely soldered on, and a good solder joint will always look shiny. That's how you know you did a good job. And if you've got little tails sticking out, just clip them off, like so. Make sure there's no sort of rough edges showing. And the next thing you want to do is take like an X-Acto knife or a razor blade, and we're going to scrape the phosphor coating off the center conductor. That's the phosphor is actually the part that lights up, but you can't solder to it, so you have to expose the bare metal to give you something to solder. So we're just going to scrape a little bit of this guy off here, and just be kind of careful doing this, because you don't want to nick the wire, because that'll make it less strong. But as you scrape, you'll be able to just sort of clean all the phosphor off. And I don't think it's super toxic or anything like that. Probably. You should probably do a better job than this. But you should get it to the point where it's just kind of like a good job there. You want sort of an offset thing, so that if there's any strain on this connection, it's going to pull on both of these equally. If you cut both of these ones to the same length, then there'd be sort of, it would look like that. And one of these would take all the force and the other wouldn't, and it would be more likely to break. So you want to do sort of a, you know what in woodworking would be a lap joint or something, so that these things are cut to match the distance of the two points you're going to connect them. So on this short one here, we're going to put the small heat shrink, and again, slide it up, because as soon as you start soldering on there, it's going to try to start shrinking. And I like to just put a little bit of extra solder on these guys, tin them, and then we'll clamp this in the other side of the helping hand, which you can't see from here. But you want it not moving around. You want it so that, you know, you can just sort of hold these things together like so, so that they're touching. They're not trying to move apart when you're soldering. And then you can, as long as they're both tinned, you can just kind of do like a reflow soldering on those guys there. And try to keep the joint from moving when you're soldering it. Try to keep it like little lumps and bumps from forming. If there's a little peak of solder, which tends to form, just, you know, trim it off, because that'll keep the heat shrink from going down. And you can just sort of make sure your heat shrink, your small heat shrink fits over that, like so. And then you can solder the other joint. And just, this is the last point where you check that you did remember the other piece of heat shrink and it's there. And again, just tin that, do a reflow solder kind of thingy there. That looks nice.